Good morning, everyone. Convening the Committee on Labor and Government Operations. It is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 at 9:33 a.m. in conference room 309. Vice Chair.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. We'll go ahead and get started with our hearing today. First up, we have Senate Bill 211, SD2, relating to employees' retirement system. First up testifying, we have Mr. Thomas Williams of ERS in support.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. I'm Tom Williams, the Director of the Employees Retirement System. I very much appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 211 SD2. When this bill was initially introduced, the ERS opposed it, quite frankly, because it did not offer the types of protections that we knew were required to protect our tax-exempt status. We offered amendments to the original bill, and those amendments were accepted. Therefore, we currently support the bill. We've had further conversations with outside tax counsel. They have suggested a few additional amendments, which are included with our current testimony. At the time our testimony was submitted, our board had not had the opportunity to review the bill. They have since reviewed the bill in depth and have evidenced their support contingent upon the amendments that are being proposed being adopted. We've been working very closely with the City and County of Honolulu. We work very collaboratively with their staff and are confident that we can achieve agreement on the couple of minimal issues that remain. We appreciate your support and ask that you advance this bill, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Ms. Nola Miyazaki with the City and County of Honolulu, Department of Human Resources, in support.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I'm Nola Miyazaki, Director of the Department of Human Resources, City and County of Honolulu. I'll stand on our testimony in strong support of the measure, and we're working very closely with ERS, as Mr. Williams mentioned, and we're confident that we can have some agreeable resolution to the language.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, members, you'll note that we have testimony in support from SHOPO, as well as a group of public sector unions, the Hawaii Firefighters Association, HCEA, HSTA, SHOPO, UPA, and UPW. Is there anyone online wishing to testify? Anyone else in the room wishing to testify in person? Okay, seeing none, members, any questions? Chair.
Yeah, ERS, please. So it's my understanding that there was a decision that broke with something like 20 years of precedent, and that we're trying to address in this bill. And I do appreciate your now support of this and the board support as well. I looked through your additional proposed amendments, and some of them seem fairly onerous to the final adjudication requirements. So you list amount, purpose, and nature of the back pay, which just doesn't itself seem that bad, but you want it broken down by month when someone could have been out of work for years and years. I'm wondering what the purpose of that is and whether that monthly breakdown was necessary in the previous 20 years that you've been handling this kind of situation.
Thank you, Chair, for your question. The reason for the breakdown is the way in which ERS is required to compute service credit. Our program credits service on a month-by-month basis, year-by-year basis, and we provide a benefit based on your highest average salary. And it's your highest average salary during any 12-month period. It's a rolling 12-month period. And we look back not only at your most recent service, but your entire career. And so for us to accurately calculate those benefits, the employer needs to provide us with when those benefits were paid and owable. So we can't arbitrarily put them in at the beginning of a year or in the middle of the year. We have to be provided instructions. Otherwise, it's arbitrary on our behalf, which is precluded by the IRS, or it's arbitrary on the employer's behalf, which is precluded by the IRS. The IRS does not allow employer discretion in computing these benefits. It has to be in accordance with the formula.
Okay, I can see that. I think it was HGA, it could have been the city, that brought up another issue about settlement agreements. Because your amendments in the bill itself requires kind of a final adjudication on the matter by a court. If a settlement agreement is reached outside of court without any kind of court action filed, what's your proposal on how to get final adjudication on the matter?
We don't have a proposal as to how to get final adjudication. We've been advised by tax counsel that we should be relying on court-ordered settlements or settlements through arbitration agreements, something that is deemed to be final. I don't believe we feel as though we can act on temporary orders or orders that are less than final. But to the extent we're able to accommodate other agreements, we're willing to look at that. But so far, our tax counsel had told us that we should be relying on orders from a court of competent jurisdiction.
Okay. I mean, and that, I think that's a problem, right? I mean, if we're requiring people to file a court action or even do a petition for kind of a special something from the court to approve of a settlement agreement, I'm not sure that would be necessarily a court order either. It might be the court's approval of a settlement agreement that exists, but if the settlement agreement deals with all issues and puts it to rest and everyone kind of puts it to bed, I feel like that should be. Anyway, I'm sure this has come up before in previous cases in the past 20 years. I'm wondering how ERS dealt with that, if it wasn't by court order.
I'm unfamiliar as to how the ERS dealt with it in the past, but I can share with you that the statute did not contemplate these types of agreements. I believe we have accommodated those agreements on a somewhat arbitrary basis, and as we look at our statutes, they do not contemplate those types of settlements. That's why the amendments or the bill that's being proposed. So we've done those in the past, but I don't think that they were necessarily in compliance with IRS requirements as we understand them today.
So the IRS, you're saying that the IRS requires a court order and will not accept a settlement agreement between the parties?
I'm suggesting that the IRS establishes very distinct requirements. Whether the court order is exactly one of those, I'm unsure. I can share with you that our tax counsel has suggested it should be subject to a court order. We're willing to take a further look at that. But we want to accept all appropriately adjudicated and settled agreements. But we also want them to comply with the IRS requirements.
Okay, and you know, I can appreciate your attorneys being extra cautious. As an attorney myself, we do tend to like court-ordered things because it kind of covers our butts. So I can respect that, but what I'd like to know is whether the IRS regulations truly require a court order or not, because I think a lot of these will hopefully be settled outside of court, and I want to encompass those settlements in this. I don't want people to have to go to court in order to settle this. It's just very costly, very time-consuming. If they can reach a settlement agreement that settles this matter outside of court, I prefer that. So if you could give me an answer for that.
I certainly believe that this bill contemplated other than court-ordered settlements, but I will verify that for you.
I think it did. I think it specifically says court-ordered settlements.
I know.
And we can broaden it, and frankly, I think we should. But I'd like the correct language, and I want to make sure that we're not running afoul of the IRS.
Well,
so what I'll probably be doing here is asking the next committee, Judiciary, to look at that. It kind of falls in their wheelhouse anyway. But if you could start working on that and work on some kind of language to encompass settlement agreements, I would appreciate it too.
we're more than willing to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Members, any other questions? I have a question for the city and county. Hi, have you had a chance to review the ERS's proposed amendments to this bill?
I'd like to invite our branch chief, Jenny Tobin, to come up and answer any questions from the committee. She's the expert on the matter.
Okay, sure thing.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, we have not had a chance to look at them in depth. We've had a chance to look at them very briefly. looking over some of their amendments, yes. The ERS was kind enough to share their amendments with us ahead of time, so we did get a chance to kind of briefly look over them.
Okay, but you're not prepared to share your opinion on it at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next bill.
Sorry, I have one more question for ERS.
Yes, Chair.
I was kind of hoping that they were going to opine on it. But there was one other section that you wanted added that would give ERS final jurisdiction, sole discretion on whether sufficient information was included in the final adjudication for this to apply. I'm
Yes.
not sure I feel completely comfortable with that kind of language, given the, again, fairly onerous requirements that you put in here. So I'm wondering if you would be okay with some kind of, I don't know, like a second chance? If someone doesn't include exactly every month calculated how you want it, if there's some kind of mechanism that you folks would be comfortable with that would give someone a chance to go back and fix it. You know, per your you comment, these things need to be fixed, and then they can have one more chance to fix it. Is that something ERS would be okay with?
I'm quite sure we would. Of course, the end result is an agreement that complies with IRS requirements, and I think that is the reason for the complexity of the evaluation of determining what needs to be incorporated therein. But we're not in the business of you get one chance to explain this, or it's all or nothing. So yes, the answer is we would be willing to give individuals an opportunity to correct information that might be missing or et cetera. It won't be just you've left a small non-important item out and we reject it. That's not our goal. So
Okay.
we'd be willing to give individuals an opportunity to correct omissions, oversights. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that we conclude that it meets the IRS requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll proceed on to the next bill, Senate Bill 389 SD1, relating to equity. This bill pertains to universal changing accommodations in state buildings. First up, we have the State Council on Developmental Disabilities in support. Don't see them in the room. Next providing comments is the Department of Accounting and General Services.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. I'm Gordon Wood, appearing for the department, and we stand on our written testimony, of course, but I will remain available if you have any questions regarding the revised language that we have suggested.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, in support, Ms. Jerry Sugano. Is she here?
Morning. Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jari Sugano, and I'm the parent of 2 children with diverse and special abilities. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of SB 389. Universal changing tables are similar to infant changing tables, but they can accommodate heavier weights. They are height adjustable. If placed in public, gender-neutral facilities, it would increase bathroom access for those families, such as those with disabilities, seniors who need caregivers, parents with young children who are the opposite gender. We by no means intend to hold up new and construction projects that are in the pipeline. We humbly ask that as you govern over new construction projects across the state, you look at the example provided by the Department of Transportation. They have provided an excellent example at the Daniel K. Inouye International Airport, where a universal changing station has been installed in the Inter-Island Terminal for various types of situations for families to access these facilities. Decisions like this help to increase inclusion of all members in our society. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all we have scheduled to testify in person. The committee will note that we do have supportive testimony from the Hawaii State Public Library System, the Disability and Communication Access Board, the Hawaii Family Caregiver Coalition, the Epilepsy Foundation of Hawaii, the Hawaii Disability Rights Center, and several individuals. Is there anyone on Zoom wishing to testify?
No one present on Zoom, Vice Chair.
Please. Thank you.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Asim Kanasha, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify for Senate Bill 389. The bill is important because children like my sister, MJ, are heavier than babies who use the infant changing tables. Without a place for her to change, then she's not able to be out for long periods of time, and she likes to be out and not inside the house. This bill will help children like my sister, as well as seniors like grandparents like my grandma was, who needed a private place to use the restroom.
Okay. Great job. Thank you for testifying in person. Okay. Anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Okay, members, any questions?
Yeah, one for Dags.
Okay, Dax, please.
Yes, sir.
So the Office of Civil Rights, the Civil Rights Commission noted that this is a fairly broad, more broad than other states have implemented, save one. It seems like, and maybe I'm misreading this bill, would this bill apply to large renovation projects as well as new construction?
Okay, that's a question that really is not clear to us, and we would make the assumption that it does apply to large renovation projects, right?
Yeah, that was also my assumption, given some of the other language in the
Yes.
bill regarding to exemptions.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm really, I thank you for your comments too. I think we are going to adopt your proposed changes for this. I'm just wondering whether you could opine on whether this needs to be implemented in every new state constructed building or renovation project, rather than ones that are more generally accessible to the public or may have that kind of need. One of my thoughts was to make this accessible to, or make this a requirement for family restrooms only, so that buildings that would naturally construct a family restroom would be ones that expect a lot of public use.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering if there are any other standards that you might suggest to narrow this a little bit.
Yeah, let's see. It's difficult. I sort of have to step aside from representing the department and just giving you my personal opinions on this as an architect and a manager of public buildings. It might be prudent to sort of limit the number of such facilities to be included. Right now, the bill calls for basically 3 of these facilities on every floor of a building, and that could be an over provision. We don't know. I don't think that there are any statistics about demand for these types of facilities, and it might be reasonable to start with something that is less than 3, maybe 1 on each floor, or multiple within a building, depending on the configuration of the building.
Are there buildings that you think should not, would it be reasonable are there family restrooms in buildings where the public generally does not travel to?
Well, okay, the bill is focused on places of public accommodation.
Okay,
Okay, and so it takes out things like
office buildings.
holding areas and prisons and things like that.
Mhm.
Although the public side of those facilities might be expected to provide this type of accommodation.
Okay, so public accommodation, forgive my ignorance, but public accommodation is just anywhere that would generally accept the public into it for services?
Public accommodation is actually, I think it's actually defined in the bill. I am incorrect, but it is defined elsewhere. For example, if we look at the ADA, there is a definition of public accommodation in there that would probably be found to be applicable here. Okay. And so that deals with all sorts of spaces, not just government buildings, but hotels, grocery stores, things of that nature.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Members, any?
I have one question.
Representative
Same
Alcos?
person.
Yes.
Does this include the beaches and parks that we have right now?
If we consider that the public restrooms at the beaches and parks are places of public accommodation, I would have to say yes, the way the bill is written. Thank you.
Okay, I have one question, if you don't mind just
Yes,
staying
sir.
there. So are you familiar with the installation at the airport that Ms. Sugano referenced?
I am not, no, but I'm happy to hear that it's been made there, yes.
Yeah, likewise. I was just curious as to the impetus behind that, if that was a decision by the airports division to install that, or if this is a trend of...
Okay. I really
I know you can't speak on
couldn't
their
answer
behalf,
that,
but-
sorry, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
regarding these universal changing stations, do you know how much they cost per unit?
I took a quick look at this a few days ago, and the units themselves seem to run in the range of $9,000 or $10,000 just for the equipment. And then you have all of the installation costs and so forth above that. Rule of thumb in construction is the labor is as much as the materials, so twice that,
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wood.
certainly.
Members, any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the next bill. Thank you. Senate Bill 696. Excuse me. Relating to workers' compensation. We have one testifier on this bill, Director Butai, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, in support.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and honorable members of the committee. Jade Butai for the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We stand on our testimony in support to provide volunteers benefits based on comparable employees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director. Anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Anyone on Zoom?
No one present on Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed on to the next bill, Senate Bill 722, relating to occupational safety and health. Again, Director Butai, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Jade Butai for DLIR. We stand on our testimony in support of the intent and offering comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Mr. Tim Lyons of the Subcontractors Association of Hawaii in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Tim Lyons with the Subcontractors Association. We are in opposition just based on the way it is currently written. Apparently, and for reasons as stated in our testimony, and apparently Department of Labor recognizes that, and the feds beat us to it because that's the prohibition is pointed out in their testimony and recognized in ours. So it would appear that the fine and money should not be going into that special fund. If HIOSH needs a special fund, so be it. We're not even arguing that point. It's just where that money is placed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyons. Members, please also note we have testimony with comments from the Department of Budget and Finance. Okay, is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Senate Bill
Yeah.
722.
Got for DLIR. So thank you for your testimony. I think it was very helpful to point out the OSHA regulations for if we accept money that we can't kind of pump it back into HIOSH. My question is, currently the money under HRS 371-12.5 for the Labor Law Enforcement Special Fund, HIOSH money and penalties are going into there under Section A3. That money is, under this section, used for personnel and operating expenses, staff development and training, things that appear to be disallowed under this OSHA regulation as well. So I'm wondering, does money from the Labor Law Enforcement Special Fund go towards HIOSH enforcement at all?
No, Chair. What happens is that it gets swept into the general fund. There's a special fund, but then after the fiscal, I think right at the end of the fiscal year, it gets swept to the general fund.
Well, it says unencumbered balances exceeding 500,000 will get swept into the general fund. So it looks like they do want to carry some kind of balance on there on a continuing basis. What is the Labor Law Enforcement Special Fund used for? Is it used for, I mean, it says it can be used for personnel and operating expenses, staff development. Is it used for other sections in DLIR? Do you know if it's
If you
being
do-
used?
If you don't mind, Chair.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe ask Norman Ahu, who's the administrator for our HIASH.
Good morning, Norman Ahu, HIASH Administrator. I think the intent of the special fund, and I don't know where the amendment went, but the thought was to use that amount held for collection purposes. So it was supposed to fund the AG's capital recovery thing because we're supposed to have an effective
Sorry, I'm having a
and
real hard
efficient-
time hearing you.
We're
Can you
supposed
speak
to
up a little louder, please?
We're supposed to have an effective and efficient collection system for
Okay.
our penalties. And so the intent of holding that amount of money was to fund the Attorney General's capital recovery collection. They established a group there that actually goes out and collects. It's like a collection agency for HIASH penalties and citations, not for our daily operations.
So the fund is used for HIASH collection of penalties? Or
It-
collection
Yeah,
of HIASH
it's supposed to fund a group in the Attorney General's office that does a collection activity, not our daily payroll or operations.
Doesn't that run exactly, doesn't that fall exactly under this restriction that was pointed out in your testimony for funds so collected may not be used for operation of the enforcement program for HIASH?
Well, it doesn't go into our operations. It goes into collecting
Or
the,
isn't that part of enforcement?
well, prior to that, there was no effective collection. So whether they paid or not, there was no third party or any other outside collection thing.
Okay.
Because if you read our grant conditions, we are supposed to have an effective collection system.
Right,
So it
and
doesn't.
So I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
My original line of questioning was questioning whether this fund, which would have, the bill proposes to split into two funds, one for HIASH and one for, and to keep the Labor Law Enforcement Special Fund in action. If the current special fund was already being used to fund certain HIASH provisions, then this OSHA provision either was already being violated or maybe you found a way around it, and it would be okay to split it and use it just for whatever is not in violation of OSHA. It sounds like it might be. So
Well, we're kind of concerned too that, it shouldn't be used for operation. But if you read the grant condition, that one paragraph, it incorporates both the effective collection and at the bottom it says it should not be used for operations. So I think the intent was and the interpretation was at the time that we can use some of that for effective collection but not for operations.
okay, this
Yeah,
is a double
what-
referral, so I'm just going to buy us more time when we get to decision making.
Yeah,
Let's talk
yeah.
later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I'll ask, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next bill, Senate Bill 724 SD2, relating to the Department of Human Resources Development. First up, we have Director Hashimoto testifying in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Brenna Hashimoto, Director of DHERD, and I'm here to ask for your support for this measure to support our information technology program within the department, and I'm available for any specific questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, please also note we have testimony from Transform Hawaii Government, Christine Sakuda in support. Is there anyone in the room wishing to testify? Anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? If not, I have one. Director? Hi there. What is your current FTE count for the department? How many positions do you have?
Department-wide, we have 90 positions,
And how many
including
are
one
filled?
IT specialist, or IT position.
And how many are filled of the 90?
We're approaching mid-60s. I think when I started, we were right at 60, but we've gained a few, so hopefully we're
Right.
creeping up slowly, closer to 65.
Okay. Yeah, I know ETS isn't here, but I was going to ask if there was like a number, like for every so many employees, you should have one IT person. So with these two, you would have a total of 3 for 90 positions.
Correct. But understanding, obviously you're familiar with DHERD's operations, we do have certain programs that are statewide that we manage. For example, our NeoGov system, which is used for applicants and recruitment purposes, as well as we're moving toward standing up computer electronic workers' comp claims management system. And so all of those projects require IT resources that we don't currently have. We service all the other state departments when it comes to workers' comp and recruitment activities. So although we may be small, we have a very large impact on the rest of the state and the other departments.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
I might also add, if I could just share that our current computers, 80% of them are nearly 10 years old. So we have continual issues with just booting up in the morning, and I'm on my second computer, having been at the department for 3 months. So we have lots of IT issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next bill, Senate Bill 725 SD2, relating to teleworking. First up, we have Director Hashimoto, DHERD, in support.
Yeah, thank you. I would stand on our written testimony in support of this measure and be available for any specific questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director. Members, please note we also have supportive testimony from the Department of Human Services, Transform Hawaii Government. We do have comments from the Office of Information Practices and opposition from the Hawaii Government Employee Association. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Representative Tam.
On DHERD, please. Could you describe to the committee what some kind of monitoring system would look like?
From my understanding, this is a priority of the Senate, and they want us to provide an electronic solution to monitoring productivity in whatever that looks like for the specific individuals who are teleworking. And the reason that it's somewhat vague is we have, of course, all different types of employees within the state, and their work is different. It's varied. And so they would like us to look at a technological solution to monitoring the performance and productivity employees who are teleworking.
Does such a system exist?
My understanding is that there are several tech solutions out there, and so we're just looking at different options at the moment.
And if we, sorry, I lost track of thought. Has there ever been an instance like that is documented that an individual has abused telework?
I believe there have been, yes.
That's all.
Okay. Any other questions? Sure, Representative Capella.
So with telework, do you know if all employees use a state device for telework?
No,
or sometimes is it on a personal device?
Yep, it's often on a personal device.
Okay, so it would be like a system that's installed onto someone's personal device that they then use for work purposes.
I'm not entirely sure. It could be something where a situation where they would need to log into our computer system in order to do their work, and then so they may be using their personal device, but they access the state's networks through some kind of program that would then track their productivity.
Okay.
Possibly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Members, any other questions?
Yes, for DHERD.
Chair?
So I think I see where you're going with this, with like a virtual desktop. Our law firm uses something similar. What we don't use, though, are monitoring devices. We just kind of track deliverables. So I'm wondering if your intention is to track keystrokes, login time, mouse movements. I mean, how far is this going to go, you think?
We haven't gotten that far in terms of researching what capabilities are out there and what the departments want. I know, for example, my experience is with Department of Human Services. So already they know how long it takes to perform certain functions, and most of their claims management is all done electronically. So they know, for example, when they receive a SNAP application, how long it should take to review that case, whether they need to do a phone interview, whether they need to review documents, and they know the average length of time it takes to make a eligibility determination. So they already have metrics in place that could track that. And whether you tie that to keystrokes or claiming cases off of a server and then how long it takes to make a determination, all of that has yet to be determined.
Sorry, what department was that?
Human Services.
Okay. So I think there is a collective bargaining issue here too, but I don't want to get to that because HGA is not here. The problem I see with this is that, and I want to say I really like telework. I mean, I really want to push it. So I really appreciate the Senate trying to push a telework policy for the state. I think it is going to be a good recruitment tool. The problem I see, though, is that we seem to be looking at the wrong thing, and I'd like your opinion on this, because this tracking system that we're about to roll out for what the Senate estimates at $20 million just to implement it seems to be tracking butts in seats versus deliverables. And if you, I mean, just using DHS as an example, if they already know approximately what can be accomplished in a certain amount of time, then I'm not sure it matters if someone is in their seat 8 hours a day at home. It just kind of matters whether they are able to do the work by a certain deadline. And if it's doing the work by a certain deadline, don't you think that managers that are already supposed to be managing employees already have systems in place or the skills they need, or maybe the capability and at least the authority they need to implement this without this electronic monitoring system at home?
I would agree with you. It really depends on the nature of the work. We have some employees who do work which is very measurable. Like I mentioned, the folks in our BESD unit, whereas you may have, for example, I'm familiar with investigators, and their work is much less easy to track because it's varied. You know, sometimes they're reviewing documents, sometimes they're writing reports, sometimes they're out doing surveillance, sometimes they're interviewing complainants or witnesses, and all of that would be much more difficult to track using an electronic monitoring device. So I'm not sure that this is the only solution, and I think, as you pointed out, supervisors generally are more familiar with the work of their subordinates and have a better sense of whether employees are productive, whether they're productive in the context of the work environment. So I don't know that this is going to solve all of our problems, but it's something to consider.
What I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you can give me an example, is what advantage this electronic monitoring system would have over what's currently in place with managers supervising employees.
I believe it would just be another way to check to see whether an employee is performing work when they're supposed to be, when we're paying them for their time, and whether or not they're actually performing work or not.
But I mean, we don't have someone hanging over someone's shoulder all the time at offices, right?
That's true.
So it just doesn't seem to be much different. I mean, I can understand the accountability, and I don't want people abusing the work from home system or the telework system, but I'm struggling to see, and I'm hoping you can give me an answer, what advantage this has over managers that we already pay to manage employees. I'm assuming that even if someone isn't in their seat working at home or in the office 8 hours a day, if they're getting their deliverables done, the managers are already measuring that, right? Isn't that the current system in place, that managers are measuring deliverables? Am I wrong about that, or do managers just manage and make sure someone's sitting in their seat 8 hours a day?
They do. I mean, obviously, they are responsible for supervising and managing, but I think it speaks to how many employees you're managing. If you've got, say, 20 subordinates, you would have to be constantly, calling them, checking up on them, seeing what they're doing, versus having a technological solution that could manage and review the productivity of all 20 simultaneously and give you feedback as to whether somebody seems to be idle and while the others are working, or vice versa.
But should we be implementing this in the offices too then? Because surely the manager isn't going and checking in on all 20 employees constantly to make sure they're working too. So I mean, if this is a problem at home, I'm assuming it's a problem at work too. And is the plan for this system to be rolled out in offices as well to track productivity?
We haven't gotten that far to determine how broad it will be implemented, but it's certainly something that we could consider.
Okay, sorry, last question. Do you see any implementation issues for this? I mean, training managers to use this new system?
Certainly. I mean, at this point, we don't have a specific proposal or a specific framework, and at this point, it's mostly conceptual. So I don't know specifically how it would be implemented and what the challenges would be, but those are things that we'll have to consider as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members, any other questions? If not, I'm sorry, Director. I should have asked you to stay up there. I have a few questions.
Getting in my steps today.
Okay, so as you noted, I am somewhat familiar with the department, having been the deputy for the last 4 years. So I have some I'm not sure what the chair's inclination is to do with this bill, but I have some very serious concerns about what this bill is trying to accomplish. I do see this, it's unfortunate that HCA is not here, because I do see this as a collective bargaining issue. This would clearly impact work conditions that I think should be negotiated between the employer and their exclusive representatives. And this idea of this surveillance system, I think there are some privacy concerns as well too. But for the record, do employees have an inherent right to telework?
No, they do not.
Okay, so if you had a productivity issue with an employee that was teleworking, would it be perfectly appropriate for the department to call them back into the office and deal with it that way?
Yes.
Okay. And also, the bill does mention for DHERD to provide telework policies of the executive branch. How many policies are there?
There is one uniform policy that applies to all HGEA employees and excluded counterparts.
Which was recently ratified, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what would this report do then if there's only one policy to report on?
Well, there's the requirement for the report is more in terms of usage as well as productivity. So we have only one policy, but it may be implemented in various departments with various levels of success and issues. So it's really to capture all of that information annually.
Okay, and then last question. Do you have any data now as to the uptake of telework for the executive branch?
No, we do not. We're in the process of rolling it out with the departments, and some of them are a little further along in the process, but soon we should know better what the applicability will be moving forward.
Okay, if you could share those results with the committee whenever it's available.
Sure.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you, Director.
how soon? Do you have just a general idea of when you might have that information?
I would suspect in the next month or so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director. Members, any other questions? If not, we'll proceed on to the next bill, Senate Bill 726, relating to the Department of Human Resources Development. First up, Director Hashimoto. Get some more steps in. Testifying in support.
Yes, thank you. This is just a housekeeping measure that we would like to support moving forward, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We don't have anyone else scheduled to testify in person. Is there anyone in the room wishing to testify? Anyone on Zoom?
None present.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to the next bill, Senate Bill 879 ST1 relating to the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We have Mr. Jun Shin testifying in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jun Shin. I am testifying today as an individual as well as a member of one of the many families who received unemployment relief when the pandemic unemployment benefits was still happening, and when the job search requirements were still exempted for that period of time. My family is one of those who received unemployment benefits. And so I'm first of all in strong support of this bill because I'm thankful to the staff who helped my family during that time, and despite being scared, frustrated, upset themselves, were able to still, despite being stretched thin, get back to my family and be able to give us, correct the mistakes and get us the relief that we needed. And I also wanted to comment on this bill because I'm also curious about because there were so many people. I'm sure you all remember the time during that time period when you were either on the receiving end of the call as volunteers or you were making calls for your family regarding unemployment benefits. I'm wondering how many people were still kind of in the ambiguous, murky, unable to get their benefits at the time that the benefits ended. And also when the job searching requirements were reinstated, I'm wondering how many people are still left behind and still kind of struggling with their claims at that time. And so I'm in strong support. I want workers to have the best, pay and benefits possible, but also I'm hoping that the legislature still continues to keep watch on unemployment insurance division and just make sure that it works for Hawaii's working people. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Okay, thank you very much. He's the only person scheduled to testify in person. Director, not to put you on the spot, but would you like to comment on this bill?
I apologize, Vice Chairman. We submitted a testimony. We stand in strong support of this measure to appropriate money to support the administration of the UI program.
Okay, thank you very much. So members, we'll get that in your packets later today. Okay, anyone else in the room wishing to testify on Senate Bill 879 SD1? Anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? None? I guess I have a question then. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, for DLAR. Thank you, yes. Sorry, Director. So I'm sorry, we don't have your written testimony in front of us, but how do you envision rolling out this retention program? Are you thinking of lump sum bonuses for employees within this branch?
No, we were going to use the money for 15 employees. To
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, Ann Eustachio. I am the administrator of the Unemployment Insurance Division. I'm so sorry you didn't get the testimony. It was written. I'm not sure why you didn't get it. It's quite lengthy, actually. It explains in detail what we plan to do with the funding. We have 15 vacant positions that we don't have funding for on the federal side. And so we are moving towards modernization. And with this modernization project, we are going to need SMEs, subject matter experts, to help us move forward with modernization. It has been proven, and there are many best practices from many other states who move towards modernization for the unemployment insurance program, that shows that if you do not have the staff to help move modernization forward and to implement that modernization, it is not normally successful. And so what we would like to do is we would like to bring up staff who are on the line right now who have background and knowledge in the unemployment insurance processes, bring them up to help with the modernized system, and then backfill those positions that are on the front line to help to continue to provide services to the community, like we should for their services, so that they can continue to receive benefits through this program.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions?
I have a
Representative Tam?
Yes.
Earlier, you talked about federal. You used the word federal.
Yes.
Are these federal positions?
So these are positions that are provided to us through the legislative state process, but we are 100% federally funded.
Oh.
So we don't normally get any state funding to run the unemployment insurance processes here in Hawaii. And so now we're reaching out to obtain funding to help us with our processes, as many other states in the unemployment insurance program have done in the past several years.
Follow-up question. So I'm reading your testimony that you submitted to WAM, and it mentions the use of federal funds instead of general funds. Is there a reason why they kept it at general instead of using federal funds to supplement this bill?
I'm not sure exactly what you're addressing. I don't think we've ever mentioned that we were going to use federal funds for these positions.
Yeah,
We normally would have received federal funds probably to cover these positions in past years, but there is no federal funding to hire for these vacant positions currently.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Sorry, if you could stay there. I just have one question.
Sure.
So you mentioned backfilling, and of course with civil service or even exempt positions, you shouldn't be pre-selecting. But are you
Correct.
comfortable that you can fill these 15 positions with the current staff you have now?
So we do have some special project positions that we're using some ARPA funds for right now. We'd like to bring them up as permanent positions online on the unemployment insurance rolls so that they can continue to learn the processes and get proficient in the unemployment insurance program. We would also like to bring in individuals who we do have as 89-day hires as well. So we are not pre-selecting, but there are individuals already available to perform services. And then we would also actually have to bring in additional new bodies as well to cover the 15.
Right. Okay, thank you, Ms. Eustachio.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Members, we're now on Senate Bill 1302 SD1 relating to public employment cost items. First up, we have the Department of Budget and Finance testifying in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Neil here for the department. We recommend moving this bill forward. We're still in negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have the Hawaii State Teachers Association, Ms. Laverne Moore, testifying in support.
Aloha, Chair and members of the committee. Laverne Moore speaking on behalf of Osa Tui Jr., President of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. The Hawaii State Teachers Association strongly supports this bill that's going to fund our collective bargaining contract. The HST team remains fully committed to working toward a negotiated settlement that shows respect for our members and that they will feel is worth ratifying. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Members, please also note we have comments from Ms. Julie Reyes-Oda on this matter. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Is there anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed to the next bill, Senate Bill 1311 SD2, relating to the repeal of Act 192, Session Laws of Hawaii 2007. First up, we have Mr. Thomas Williams of PRS testifying in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Tom Williams testifying in support. We stand on our testimony. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, please also know we have testimony opposition from an individual. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify on Senate Bill 1311 SD2? Anyone on Zoom?
None present.
Okay, thank you. All right, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the second to the last bill of the agenda, Senate Bill 1313 SD1, relating to the Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund. We have one testifier in person, Mr. Derek Mizuno of the Hawaii EUTF, testifying in support.
Good afternoon, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. Derek Mizuno, EUTF Administrator, will stand on our written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? Anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the last bill of the agenda, Senate Bill 1384, SD2, relating to workforce development. We have one person scheduled to testify, in person, excuse me, Director Butai, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Thank you for hearing this governance package proposal. We stand on our testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to testify? I have to ask, anyone on Zoom?
None present on Zoom.
All right, thank you. Members, any questions? Senate Bill 1384, SD2.
Questions for Martha?
Chair?
DLIR. So thank you for being here. I spoke with my Senate counterparts some on this measure as well yesterday evening to kind of clarify where they're trying to go with this measure as well in their amendments. The one thing that kind of stuck out to me was their concern that this is a board appointed by the governor, but that DLIR wants to put into its sort of structure as opposed to being administratively attached. Can you speak to that, or are there any other boards that are appointed by the governor that are sort of integrated into a department rather than just being administratively attached?
Chair, let me ask Marikar. She's our administrator for Workforce Development Division.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Marikar Pilaten-Freitas with the Workforce Development Division. So in regards to your question, the Workforce Development Council versus the Workforce Development Agency. So Act 202, this is the General Appropriation Act abolished the Workforce Development Council as an agency. Now the board, there's no legislation, current legislation, to say that if their advice and consent, they have to be administratively attached to any agency. So based on the testimony provided by the Attorney General's office, it was really to have the board within the department for administrative purposes to provide oversight and advice to the governor on the federal legislation under Title I, II, III, and IV of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act.
Okay. So this is going to just be me being ignorant here, so I appreciate your tolerance, but if the board is a part of DLIR, do they report to the director, or do they go right to the governor with their recommendations, or how does that work?
They're appointed by the governor, which is in alignment with the federal legislation. And for Hawaii, of course, any time the appointment is by the governor, then they are confirmed by the Senate, so they are advice and consent.
Right. I'm just more thinking of more like a chain of command structure, if that is applicable here. If the board is a part of DLIR as opposed to sort of just on the side but administratively attached, then are they part of the structure of DLIR then?
They are part of the DLIR.
Are there any other boards that are integrated into any other departments like that are appointed by the governor, not just in DLIR, but in other agencies as well, departments as well?
I can't answer that for sure, but we couldn't find any, Chair.
that are integrated
Yeah.
like that. Okay. See, and that's my concern. It seems, well, that not only my concern, but the Senate's concern as well, that it seems a little odd to do this, especially if there's no precedent and no existing boards that are appointed by the governor but are integrated into the department like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, if not.
Okay, we'll recess for decision making. Recess. Reconvening the Committee on Labor and Government Operations. It is still Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 in Conference Room 309. Okay, so first up we've got SB 211 SD2 relating to the employees' retirement system. Chair's recommendation is to keep this bill moving. I am not going to be adopting the ERS amendments yet. I think DHS needs more time to look at it and analyze it. I will be putting in the committee report language asking the Judiciary Committee to look into settlement agreements and including settlement agreements made in good faith without any kind of final adjudication by a court of competent jurisdiction, and also into giving some kind of language to allow second or third or good faith chances for, if the correct information is not included in whatever court order comes out or settlement agreement, that they can have another chance to try to amend that to conform to what ERS needs. But otherwise, we're just going to be doing tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or concerns? Okay, see none. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 211 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Capella?
Aye.
Representative Martinez? Representative Sayama?
Aye.
Representative Tam?
Aye.
Representative Alcos?
Aye.
Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 389 relating to equity. I have some concerns on this bill that it is a little broad. I do note that the 2024 IBC, or International Building Code, is going to recommend that these facilities only be put in for, or that these facilities be put in for family restrooms. So I am going to, my recommendation is to adopt the DAGS amendment, to have this specifically only apply to new construction and not renovations, to have this only apply to family restrooms, and to not put this anywhere exposed to the elements. I think that if these facilities are installed in places like beach restrooms or such, that could lead to a lot of maintenance fees and might be a big waste of money too. Any questions or comments? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 389 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, all members vote aye. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 696 SD1 relating to workers' compensation. We're just going to be further defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 696 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Any reservations or nays? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 722 SD2 relating to occupational safety and health. We are going to be deferring this measure to a later date, or possibly indefinitely, depending on our conversation with DLIR. But I think we need more clarification right now on what this current special fund is being used for, and whether we can make some kind of special fund for HIOSH work, possibly not under the, whether we can make another special fund work under OSHA regulations to pay for certain items in HIOSH that maybe aren't related to specifically enforcement or whatever is not permitted under OSHA. So we'll be deferring that for now, but it may be coming back. Moving on to SB 724 SD2 relating to the Department of Human Resource Development. This one will be just further defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 724 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Any reservations or nays? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to SB 725 SD2 relating to teleworking. I really appreciated the discussion and my discussion with the Senate as well on this issue. And I actually really appreciate the Senate bringing this up. I really believe telework is necessary for the future of our state, not only in attracting and retaining workers, but in giving people the flexibility that they need to kind of live their daily lives. I'm concerned that this bill may be looking too much at old school sort of butts and seats rather than deliverables, and I'd like us to go to possibly in a different direction. I'm also concerned that monitoring too closely for telework is going to deter people my generation and younger from seeking state jobs in the first place, or restricting the benefits of teleworking in our minds. So I'm going to be deferring this to a later date until I can speak with the Senate further on this. But again, I do want us to be moving forward with telework. I want to make that very clear. I don't know that this system is necessarily the right one, but I'm not necessarily ruling it out either. But I think it does need some work. So recommendation is to defer at this time. Moving on to SB 726 SD1 relating to the Department of Human Resources Development. I'll be further defecting this date to June 30th, 3000. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on SB 726 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 879 SD1 relating to the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We'll just be further defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. And we'll be noting in the committee report that there are 8 positions in the House budget for this purpose as well. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on SB 879 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 1302 SD1 relating to public employment cost items. We'll just be further defecting the effective date to June 30th, 3000. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 1302 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 1311 SD2 relating to the repeal of Act 192, Session Laws of Hawaii 2007. We'll be making some technical amendments to this for clarity, consistency, and style. I do want to note in the committee report that there is a good effective date on this bill. It's a housekeeping bill, though. So we're just going to move it along. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 1311 SD2, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to SB 1313 SD1 relating to the Hawaii Employer Union Health Benefits Trust Fund. We'll just be further defecting the date to June 30th, 3000. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on SB 1313 SD1, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Last bill on the agenda, SB 1384 SD2 relating to workforce development. Chair's recommendation is to conform Section 2 of this bill to the House's version of Section 2. That would be House Bill 1086 HD1. And we're also going to be removing the word also in page 3, line 15, upon the recommendation of the AG. Although I don't know that it's entirely necessary. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair with the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on Senate Bill 1384 SD2. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, all members vote aye. Your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. We are adjourned.